Today, we're going to unpack one of the most dramatic stories in modern history, the Great Depression. Seriously, it's a story of these incredible, dizzying highs, a crash that was absolutely terrifying, and a nation that had to figure out how to put itself back together again. So, let's dive in.
I mean, just let that sink in for a second. That one sentence tells you everything about the shock of this era. Imagine it. There was no war, no big natural disaster, just a sudden, brutal economic collapse that vaporized fortunes and changed the course of America forever. It really sets the stage for everything that follows.
But you know, before the crash, there was one heck of a party. Post-war America was just buzzing with energy. It was a nation high on victory and totally convinced that the good times were never going to end. This was the Roaring Twenties, an era just fueled by new tech, crazy optimism, and of course the sound of the jazz age.
And that line, it just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? The whole decade felt loud, fast, and electric. Factories that were making tanks a few years earlier were now pumping out toasters, cars, and refrigerators. The entire country was just racing toward this modern, consumer-driven future.
So get this, 10 million. That's how many homes had a radio by 1929. And for the very first time, mass media was connecting the whole nation. You had millions of people listening to the same songs, the same news, and, this is the important part, the same ads. It created this shared hunger for all the latest and greatest stuff.
So how is everybody affording all this new stuff? Well, simple, credit. The whole idea of installment plans just exploded. You didn't need the cash right away, you just needed a pulse, basically. And this allowed the economic boom to grow way, way beyond what people could actually afford, which, as you can imagine, created a very fragile kind of prosperity.
But here's the thing. This prosperity, it wasn't for everybody. You see, while the cities were booming, rural America was already in a deep crisis. The wartime demand for crops was gone, prices had totally plummeted, and farmers who'd borrowed money to modernize were now just sinking deeper and deeper into debt. You could already see the cracks forming in the economy if you looked close.
And this quote right here, it says it all about the stock market mania. Literally, everyone was playing the market, and they were often doing it with borrowed money through something called margin loans. Think about it. You could buy $100 of stock with just $10 down. And it felt like a sure thing because stocks only ever went up, right? Shoeshine boys, barbers, everybody was an expert.
And then the music stopped. On October 29, 1929, that bubble didn't just pop, it detonated. The party was officially, and very, very brutally, over.
Now, the collapse wasn't just one single moment. It was this rapid, terrifying downward spiral. It started with a tremor on Black Thursday, which sent some serious jitters through the market. By Monday, those jitters had turned into full-blown panic. And then on Tuesday, well, the floor just gave out completely. It was a total system failure.
It is hard to even wrap your head around the scale of the destruction. In today's money, we're talking about over $200 billion in wealth that just evaporated. And this wasn't just numbers on a ticker tape. This was people's life savings, their retirement funds, their family homes. All of it gone in the blink of an eye.
And see, this wasn't just a stock market crash. It was the first domino in this catastrophic chain reaction. So the market falls. Then brokers make what are called margin calls, demanding investors pay back loans they no longer have. That bankrupts the investors and starts taking down the banks. Well, panic spreads, right? So people rush to withdraw their savings, causing even healthy banks to fail. And then the whole crisis leaps across the Atlantic as U.S. banks demand their foreign loans back, absolutely crippling Europe's economy.
So, behind all those financial numbers was a truly devastating human tragedy. The collapse on Wall Street quickly spread to Main Street, and it became a story of just day-to-day survival that would touch every single corner of the country.
And the numbers, they tell a chilling story. In just 4 years, unemployment skyrockets from about 3% to nearly 25%. That means 1 out of every 4 American workers was jobless. Factories went silent. Bread lines snaked for blocks through city streets. This wasn't a recession. It was a complete societal breakdown.
And just when it seemed like things couldn't possibly get any worse, they did. Years of aggressive farming, coupled with a severe drought, literally turned the Great Plains into a desert. These massive dust storms, people call them black blizzards, buried entire farms and forced millions of people to flee their homes.
President Herbert Hoover, who was really against large-scale federal aid, became the face of all this suffering.
His name became this bitter shorthand for the misery people were going through, from the shanty towns they lived in, to the newspapers they used for warmth, to the empty pockets they turned inside out.
But out of all this despair, a new voice and a new direction finally emerged. In 1933, Franklin D. Roosevelt took office, and he promised action. He promised a fundamental shift in how the government would approach people's lives.
And with these words, FDR didn't just offer a plan, he offered hope. It was a direct challenge to the paralysis and the despair that had just gripped the whole nation. It was a clear signal that things were finally about to change.
And the change came fast. The New Deal unleashed this whole flurry of programs. People famously called it the alphabet soup, and it was designed to attack the crisis on two fronts: relief and reform. So for immediate relief, you had programs like the CCC and WPA putting millions of Americans back to work. And then for long-term reform, you had agencies like the SEC and the FDIC created to police Wall Street and ensure bank deposits, all to try and make sure a crisis like this could never, ever happen again.
But, when you look at it, the New Deal was about so much more than building dams and roads. By giving people a job, a purpose, and a paycheck, it started to restore something that was even more valuable: a sense of dignity and confidence to a nation that had completely lost both.
The Great Depression completely reshaped America. It created safeguards we still rely on today, things like Social Security and the FDIC, but it also leaves us with this big, lingering question. In our own world of complex financial systems and economic uncertainty, have we truly learned the lessons from that decade when the party ended and the world just fell apart?